Battlestate Games just wrapped up their Tarkov TV live podcast. This normally happens before a patch, but for some reason they wanted to get the patch out, let us experience it, and then do the podcast. It was basically just a big Q&A with Nikita. He answered a lot of questions about why they did some things with 12.11 and what's to come in Escape from Tarkov. So let's get into all that. I stream Escape from Tarkov on Twitch. All my links will be down below, but with all that stuff out of the way, let's go ahead and dive right in. So what we'll do is we'll just have kind of some B-roll going while we kind of break down the most important things that happened in the podcast. I'm going to try and get through as much of it in as little time as I can. So work with me here. First of all, there was drops, and this kind of felt like a replacement for the Christmas gift. I'm sorry if you weren't there and you didn't get that. Definitely follow them on Twitter for more notifications when they do podcasts like this, because they normally do drops. The first drop was 100,000 rubles. The second one was an ammo case, then a grenade case, then a docs case, and then a Vaseline. So a lot of stuff that's really going to help out some players without like breaking the economy. He really quickly mentioned that there were going to be no leaks, no new information that's like pictures or guns or anything like that, but more answering questions. They want to give us more info soon on upcoming patches. But right now they're working on stabilizing 12.11 and getting fixes and stuff like that. Basically, half the team is working on stabilizing 12.11 and the other half of the team is working on 12.12. He doesn't want to lay out a specific feature plan for 12.12 yet because that's not really soon. He kind of made it sound like it's like later, not really soon. Nobody knows what that means. The art team is working on Lighthouse. We did get a little bit of information about Lighthouse. They're still planning to do that before Streets. It's going to be a big location. They want 2 bosses on Lighthouse. He kind of made it sound like they might not be able to get them both in at launch, but they want 2 bosses. And then he mentioned there's going to be an additional trader that's physicalized on Lighthouse. He'll be very hard to get to. He'll be guarded by a sniper, potentially the sniper scav boss. But if you can get to him, you can actually physically deal with him in the game. I think this is awesome. I think this is a big push towards potentially open world and a lot of gameplay loops that they've talked about in the past. This is really interesting. He talked at length about the flea market change, and I think this is the big thing people are interested in. They very specifically did the flea market change to level 20 to prolong the early wipe gameplay. This is really important. The gameplay of struggling to get to level 20, the gameplay of struggling and trying to find items and trying to get caught up and that struggle, that is Escape from Tarkov. That's the game Nikita wants to make. Not metas, not super quick gameplay, not super short fights. So I think he's balancing the game for the greater community. Of course, you're always going to have people that can no-life the game and basically just like rip through and get those things early. But the vast majority of the player base, the lion's share, are struggling to get to 20, and the early game fights are lasting longer, and it's feeling like the Tarkov he wants to make. So he specifically said it's not them trying to punish casuals, but more turn the game in the direction that they want it. It supports the style of play that Nikita wants for the game. He thinks it's a positive change so far. He mentioned this, which is a huge thing. They want us to let us use the flea market interface sooner. So we can, link search or filter by item, and it's only going to show us the traders. That's a much easier way to modify weapons and do a lot of different things. They are working on that. There were questions about how to access the flea market from the hideout, maybe through the Intel Center. He talked about that kind of stuff is planned. And he also implied that there are other changes that they want to make for when the community gets to level 20 to extend the early game. He basically kind of implied it's not quite over, that this patch is a lot about extending that early game, and so that there are some things in place so that when most of the community is level 20, it's not like it was last wipe. He even implied they could potentially split up the flea market into sections and then unlock them periodically, maybe one part through a level, one part through the hideout, one part from a quest. That was really interesting. We'll see how they kind of flesh that out. And he talked about wanting it to be more of a blend where the community slowly gets access to the flea market. And then once even they get access to the flea market, slowly gets access to things. He doesn't want it to feel like this jumping off a cliff moment where there's like 2 Tarkovs. There's before everybody gets the flea market and after everybody gets the flea market, because you just flip a switch and get access to anything you want all of the time, but more of a blend as you level up and as you gain access to more things. He talked about the Unity 2019 migration and that once again, it's still hopefully going to be coming to the ETS servers over the next month or so, and that it's nothing going to be crazy groundbreaking immediately, but it's more about creating a better dev environment and allowing them to optimize the game and optimize the network better. There's a lot of cool things that could potentially come from it. There's a lot of development, speeding up that could happen as a result of it, but it's not like Unity 2019 will drop and then suddenly the game will look 10 times better. This is more of a vehicle to make changes later. Then Nikita talks quite a bit about the Scav Karma system. We're still in the early days of Scav Karma. He is loving that he is seeing, after the first few days of the wipe, a lot more cooperation between scavs, and they want to continue to push that. They're looking at the data. They are making relevant changes. They've already made several changes in the future. And then he was even very open and accepting of additional ideas, maybe an additional fence level where you can buy labs gear and stuff like that. There were a lot of questions and there were a lot of ideas given, and he seemed pretty open to them. They really like this. And he even mentioned that this is still just the first iteration of Scav Karma and that the second iteration of Scav Karma is coming in 12.12. We don't really know what that means. He didn't go into what that second iteration is, but there are still changes to be made. There's still a lot more that's going to come, and he likes kind of the direction it's going. He kind of implied that there were still some ways to level up the fence reputation that we haven't found yet. That could have been a misunderstanding on my part, but that's kind of what it sounded like he was saying. Maybe eventually even playing as a raider or a player scav on labs. And then he even talked about how he loves that more people are bartering and are like trading things as scavs. And he was talking about potentially adding UI elements or gestures that would promote that. I think a gesture or something like that could be pretty cool. I don't think a UI element is necessarily required if we're getting VoIP soon, but what's cool is that he wants to encourage this barter system between player scavs and stuff like that. He talked a little bit about the hideout. A big thing coming with the hideout is he said that they are going to allow us to partially turn in items. So a lot of hideout things like illumination, you need 14 light bulbs. Instead of having to save all 14 and then hand them in when you have everything, you can hand them in as you go. This will be insanely huge for stash space, and I think this is a great addition to the game. It's not in yet, but whenever it comes, that's going to help whether you're on standard edition or EOD, but it's going to help make saving things not so painful because you can kind of turn them in as you get them. He talked about they want to add more stations and more areas to the hideout, but that's really it. We have no idea what or when. There were some questions about the recoil system, and he was basically saying that foundationally, the recoil system is final. They're not going to change the recoil system, but they are constantly making adjustments to specific guns and attachments to make the recoil in the guns feel more realistic. They are making more barters for more early game needs. They pulled the Lucky Scav junk box earlier and made that cheaper. They added barters for like the customs office key, the Tarkov director key, and a few other things. Basically, instead of creating static spawns for these, that takes a lot more dev time because you have to push stuff around with loot pools. They're just making more barters for these, which I think is a good idea if it saves them time and it helps once again smooth out and blend the early game. Inertia is still planned for coming in 12.12. That's awesome. The audio overhaul is partially dependent on Unity 2019. Part of it is going to be coming in 12.12. He said it still requires a lot of work. It's kind of just like a mixture. There's a lot. They want to redo the audio. Obviously, everybody wants them to redo the audio. And part of that will be when they get Unity 2019. And part of that will be just putting more work into it. He said they're continuing to basically break records. They had up to 250,000 concurrent players during these past few days since 12.11. It's partially why the long matching times are there. He still wants to do a graphical overhaul of the game, including the lighting, shadows, fog, indoor atmosphere, vegetation, all the different things we interact with. That's just going to take a lot of work. No real time frame on that. DLSS is being worked on. Basically, no time frame on that yet because they're working with NVIDIA. It's 100% going to happen, but we just don't know when. This was a really interesting thing. Suburbs and town are officially being moved to DLC. So Lighthouse and Streets are coming. After that, the tutorial location, which is basically just going to be a small location. He didn't give us a lot about that. And then the quote-unquote final map of the game, Terminal. Those are the only things planned before 1.0. Lighthouse, Streets, a tutorial location, and Terminal. So 3 actual full-blown maps, and everything else has been pushed to DLC, including Suburbs and Town and any of the other things that they want to add. That's very, very interesting. That kind of goes in line with what I've been thinking, which is that they're really trying to chart a path to 1.0. What are the core mechanics that are needed? What are the core maps that are needed? What's the core lore that's needed? How do we get these storyline quests in and get us to 1.0? That makes sense to me with how Nikita has been talking and with how the development has gone. And then there's already a bunch of other DLCs that they've talked about, Scav Life and all, winter stuff. But now some of those maps, suburbs and town, have officially moved to DLC as well. Overall, the availability and durability of gear, especially high tier gear, will lower as we try to move away from metas. So he didn't really go too much into that, especially with kind of the translations of everything. But he kind of made it sound like it's going to be harder to get, a full durability, fully meted M4 or FAL or something like that, or armor that it's constantly going to be a balance of what's the durability, what's my access to this, can I buy the ammo, which kind of makes sense to me. Up at that higher tier, those things should be rare and they should feel like there's always a sacrifice being made. There's always a choice being made on what's worth running and what's not. So he didn't go too much into detail about that, but I'm very interested in that and very okay with that. No major changes are coming to the secure containers. There were questions asked about the secure container event leading up to patch 12.11, and they aren't going to change the core functionality of secure containers. That core gameplay loop is basically set in stone. They don't want to deal with the backlash of changing it. However, they have modeled several new containers, and new ones are going to be coming, and they could potentially have interesting mechanics to them. This makes sense to me. Let the alpha be the alpha, let the beta, let the epsilon, let the gamma be exactly what they are, and then add new cool containers that maybe have modifiers to them that have, once again, kind of like a plus and a minus, a choice to be made. A player can choose to grind for that if they want. They can use it. It can create some interesting dynamics, but they're not going to make sweeping changes. They could make small changes to the containers as we see them, but basically he was saying that nothing ginormous is going to happen to them where you can't use them or they're going to take them away. He talked about the events that they did leading up to 12.11 and that they tested them for a reason. They collected a lot of cool data about that. And there's going to be a lot of new stuff, about the Aldalbos event and how funny that was to see people basically play Russian roulette. So he said more stims and interesting things are going to be coming. They did those events for a reason. They learned a lot from them. And hopefully we see potentially more events and more cool things coming from the data they got from that. And then finally, he did confirm that the Scar H and the Scar L are going to be coming in 12.12. He knew we were disappointed to not see it in 12.11, but he said they are coming in 12.12. Let's just hope that, whatever happened that caused them to get pushed from 12.11 doesn't happen again and they can get them in 12.12. So that's it. That's most of the changes. That's almost everything that was talked about in this podcast. Of course, there's going to be a few things here or there. If you're interested in watching the full thing, you can go on the Battle State Games Twitch page and then watch the VOD. It was really cool. I love these. I love Nikita coming out and answering questions. I hope stuff like this happens on both ends of future patches where they do podcasts beforehand to show us new things and then follow up a patch with a podcast like this. I really liked being able to get in the game for a few days and then immediately after have the community ask specific questions about this patch and then hear his thoughts and ideas about them. So I thought that was really cool. So hopefully this helped. Hopefully this brought you up to speed and got you back into Escape from Tarkov, having a blast. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. If you like it, think about dropping a like, commenting down below, or subscribing to the channel for more content like this. Like we said before, I stream Escape from Tarkov on Twitch. All my links will be down below. I'd love to have you stop by and say hey. And if you're looking for people to play Tarkov with, our Discord server is an awesome place to be. That link is down below as well. Definitely check that out. Thank you again for stopping by, and I will definitely see y'all on the next one.